Okay, hello. So in this part of the video, and it's probably the last video coming from this thesis topic, we shall connect a WaveShare 10-inch touchscreen to our Raspberry Pi. I will start with a small warning for everybody who's watching. So the instructions that I mention here are only apply to the WaveShare 10-inch touchscreen, which means that other touchscreens made by other manufacturers won't necessarily follow these same steps. So if that's the case for you, make sure to adhere those. Now, what is needed for this part of the project? First of all, fully configured Raspberry Pi 3B. Of course, you will need the power supply for that device. And secondly, a WaveShare monitor. And since that I'm taking my project with me between Leuven and the place I live, I also used a plexiglass plate, and for this I ordered a bit of a bigger package than just the monitor. Aside from that, you will also need a power supply that provides 12 volt and at least 1 ampere. Just as with the Raspberry Pi itself, you can recycle those from old external hard drives. Most of those use a 12 volt power supply. Now, what is provided in this package? There was provided an LCD screen, which is also the touch screen. A kind of a Mars board was provided with. Now, don't fret if you don't know what this is. Then a USB to micro USB cable was provided as well. A very short HDMI cable, a plexiglass plate, and a plethora of nuts and bolts were also present in the package. Now, I shall provide just some still photos, because there was really no use in recording me assembling everything. It would take about 10 minutes, so just pay attention to the photos and you can do this on your own as well. Now, what you're looking at here is this is the touchscreen facing downwards, and when starting with the assembly of this, you will need to take off 4 very small bolts that are normally on top of here, and you replace them with these copper colored bars. Now, don't pull on any side of your screen whilst the 4 nuts are off, because otherwise the screen might come apart and we don't want that. Now we take another part that came with this package. This is the plexiglass package. If you're not using it, you can ignore this. What I've done is I've followed the template that's on this machine on this plate for the Raspberry Pi, and I've inserted the bolts and nuts so that the nut is facing the clear side and the bolts is facing the paper side. This is now what we're working with, and as you can see, there are pre-drilled holes everywhere, and I had to select or I had to follow the pattern set out by number 2 for my Raspberry Pi. Next up, you'll take your Mars board. Now, this is the Mars board here, and you'll also need 4 screws, 4 spacers, and 4 nuts. What you'll do now is you'll insert the 4 screws on the paper side of the Raspberry Pi, or of the plexiglass cover. Now, in case that you're flipping it over and the screws drop out, what you can do is you can use some painting tape or masking tape or whatever tape you've laying around, and just cover them up so that they don't fall out every time you flip it over. Next, you drop your spacers onto onto the thread of the screws, so that they provide a little bit of space between the board itself and the plexiglass plate. Next, you put the Mars board on it and make sure that all of the connections are facing outwards. So the connections we will be using for this project is a micro USB port, an HDMI port, and a power supply. Next up, secure all of the 4 screws with the 4 bolts, and that's it. Now, on the bottom of the Mars board there are 5 buttons. These buttons are used to configure the source and configure brightness and stuff like that of your LCD screen. Now there's a small paper that comes with the WaveShare monitor, and it has a legend of what key does what and how you should configure it, and it's really clear and really easy to do. Now this is the most fiddly bit of the entire process. In this part we shall connect our Mars board to our screen, and it's going to look a bit like this. Now what you need to do to achieve that is you need to lift this very small connector that reads RGB, so behind this it says RGB, and you need to lift it so that these pins are bare. Then you take the flat cable, it's a kind of data cable that came with your WaveShare screen, and you insert it in such a way that the bare pins of the cable are touching the bare pins of the RGB connector. Now you need to pay attention to two things. First of all, are they inserted as far as can be, and secondly, is it inserted straight? If it's a little bit skewed, then the connection won't be made properly and your Mars board won't communicate with the WaveShare screen and it won't have power to be lit up. Now you do the same with your WaveShare screen. So this is a screen that you put these copper blocks on, and again we use the RGB connector. And what you can do now is you can apply power to this Mars board. So you just take your 12-volt adapter, apply power to it, and if your connection has been made properly, the screen will lit up. Now it's very easy also to select the proper source, so whilst you're at it and whilst power is on, you can use these keys to set the source to HDMI. Once that's all done, we simply take 4 screws, put the plexiglass plate on top of our screen and connect them. So for this we used these 4 pre-drilled holes. Next up we shall adapt our config.txt file. So as before, this config.txt file, it holds all of the important variables, system variables that are needed to boot the Raspberry Pi. And in this case we wanted to boot in such a specific way that it uses the touchscreen as an input device and also has the proper resolution. Now for this we need to undo all of our previous edits in the config.txt file, and in our case there was only one edit that was made, and it was the overscan option. We just disabled that by adding a hashtag in front of it, and then at the very bottom of this config.txt file we add 5 small lines of code. Now they aren't capitalized and none of them except for the last have a space in them, so pay attention to that. And again, check your paper that came with your WaveShare monitor to ensure that all of these variables are the same. Save it. Once it's saved, take out the microSD card from your computer and put it back into your Raspberry Pi, and now we can connect it to our touchscreen. For this we take the HDMI cable, and as I said before, it's a very short cable, and a micro USB to USB cable. Start by attaching the USB cable to the Raspberry Pi, and then insert the micro USB in the micro USB port of the Mars board, and do the same for the HDMI connection. So when you're looking from the side, this looks like this. This is your micro USB port and this is the HDMI port. Here is the power supply, and as you can see there's no power applied to this machine, and it's kind of a recommendation I have for you: never apply power to a machine you're working on. If you're dropping a screw on it, or if you make a scratch on it or anything, you can short it out really easily. So once it is in a state like this, just test it, make sure that everything is working correctly, and if it works, take 4 of the other screws and just tie the Raspberry Pi to the back of the plexiglass plate, and be careful with it because the plexiglass plate bends really easily. And that's it. You now have a fully working touch capable Raspberry Pi 3B that's running a 10-inch touch screen. Thank you very much for watching.